Go live. Hello and welcome to Shar's Craft Lounge live stream. Today we're going to be talking about materials. So the bread and butter of lasering. So materials. We've got a little bit of a pre-show going on. So as you can see me, as you can hear me, please type in materials you're interested in learning more about, or if there's a specific thing you're stuck on, and we will add those to the queue and get to them as we get to the right place in the live stream. So I see 2 people watching. We'll see if more people get on. I know there are a few people waiting. I had a couple of hiccups. I had connected my account with OBS and streaming, and then apparently either OBS changed or YouTube did. So I had to go back and get a stream key. So I apologize for being a couple of minutes late. Again, put in the comments if there's a specific material you're struggling with, or just say hi, where you're from, how your weather was today, wherever you are. So again, we're going to be talking about materials, we're going to be talking about settings, and hopefully this will give you, if not the settings you've been looking for, it'll give you a good framework for how to find good settings without wasting tons of material. So we'll get to that. Again, welcome. As you join, please let me know you're here, and we will get to questions you have. Feel free to add those in. So, all right. Hello, Jennifer. Hey, Rebecca. Rebecca of infamy, the PhD student that we have. So welcome. It's great to see you all. Okay, yeah. So experimenting with acrylic. I love acrylic. A lot of the materials in this box are different kinds of acrylic. I don't even have swatches for all the kinds of acrylic I have. So it is definitely one of my vices is collecting acrylic, especially shiny glitter acrylic. So any other questions you have about materials, or something you want to make sure that we get to, please put that in the chat. An overview of basically what I'm going to go through. I'm going to go through my material philosophy. So essentially, how I approach new materials, how I approach exotic materials, and then talk about the Laserbox software, how you can make material profiles. I have a ton of those, so I'll go through some of those. Material testing. So say you don't have settings to begin with, how do you figure that out without wasting tons of material? And then at the end, we'll talk about unique materials. So things that perhaps you don't want to waste a sheet of or waste very much of. How do you get close to good settings so that you can use the least amount of material to get good settings? Things like using masking tape on Yetis before trying to do a Yeti. So that's an overview of what we're going to do tonight. Hopefully that is good with you all. Hopefully advertising did not promise you something different than that. And again, if you have ideas for next month's live stream, please let me know. I'm always happy to hear either ideas for videos or ideas for live stream topics. In our talking about materials, I know that Vince has asked, we'll see if Vince shows up, has asked for me to talk a little bit about kerf. So as we're talking about different materials, I might slide that a little bit in if I remember. So Vince, if you show up, please remind me if you want me to talk a little bit about kerf. So awesome. Yes, shiny. Love the shiny materials. Mirrored acrylic is really fun, and you can do really cool stuff with it. So we'll see. We got about 7 minutes until the bewitching hour, so to speak. So again, welcome to everybody who's here so far. the early crew. And yeah, drop any questions you have in the chat. Thanks to my wife Jennifer, Mrs. Shar, or whatever you want to call her, for manning the chat. So as I'm spinning all these plates, um, hopefully most of them don't fall. As we get in about a minute or two, I'm gonna just test my cameras. I know last time we had some issues with transitioning cameras, so I'll go through that shortly, and hopefully you'll be able to say yes. I can see, I can see the settings document. I can see the Laserbox software. I can see inside of the machine. I'm gonna turn on the machine. Again, a quirk, a quirk with the software is that you can't see the material profiles unless it's on. So I apologize for it being a little loud when it comes on. I won't turn on the fan, so hopefully you'll still be able to hear me well. All right. Ooh, yes. What not to do with mirrored acrylic? That is really the question. It is so shiny and so amazing. You can do lots of fun stuff. Alright, I'm going to go through and do camera tests. So this is going to be left monitor, which is the settings document. I know it's probably too small for you all to see, but I will be referencing it. Let me get a link and put that in the chat. We'll see if it lets me put links in chat. I have not tried that. So that is left monitor and then top monitor. Can everybody see that? And then the top monitor is Laserbox software. So let me know if you can see that. Should have Sonic on it, the hedgehog. Oh, purple mirrored acrylic, yes. We had electric blue. Okay, you can see Sonic. Hopefully you can see the Google Sheet as well. The Google Sheet is where community settings are, so you can send an email to Shar's Craft Haven, no apostrophe at Gmail, to add your settings to that document. It's helpful also if when you send settings, if you use a link, so a link to the materials, so that way I can add those in, but sometimes it's unclear what the material is, so I can add those in, and I can also add links to those materials so people can use them as well. Alright, I don't think I'll use this, but just to continue the test, this is the room camera. Hi. So room camera, see my lovely vacuum cleaner. And then the last one, which I might not use, but I'm just, for thoroughness, the laser cam. So hopefully you can see all of those. And I will wait a second as I know chat is delayed. See Sonic, yep. Alright, did you guys see room and inside the laser as well? Let me know. I know there's a delay. It's like 60 seconds, so I apologize. It's just the way the gremlins roll. So you can see in the machine as well. Excellent. Alright. Alexa, turn on guest room. Alright, hopefully you can still hear me. I'll speak a little louder. Yes, the fancy vacuum. Yeah, the vacuum. I need to probably come up with a name for the vacuum. Yeah, the vacuum Vacuum is what keeps my laser going. It's my faithful companion. My um oh, what's it? I forget the name. Don Quixote's companion. All right. Excellent. All right, so let's get started. As people join, hopefully they will they'll see what we're up to. Feel free to share. So I've posted. I posted yesterday in the official group, in the unofficial group, and in the main group. So if you know somebody who lasers outside or inside of those groups, feel free to invite them along. And since it is the bewitching hour, we're gonna get started. All right. And is the volume all right with the machine? Can you hear me over the machine? Can see my hair going crazy against the back door. So just give a thumbs up if you can see and hear me. I'm a little anxious from last time where I had a camera do some funky stuff. So just let me know in the chat and we will get started. Yes. Yay, can hear and see me. Excellent. All right, so first off, philosophy. So why I start with this sounds a little silly, but bear with me. So the philosophy of how I approach materials is that one, there are many answers. So there's not a set of settings to rule them all, so to speak. So you find your best setting for what you want. So if somebody has engraving that they like and they like it deep and dark and that's great. If you like your engraving lighter, if engraving needs to do something different for you, so if you need to do engraving fast and a score line is your thing, like don't feel like there's a right setting. So the second part of my philosophy would be that it's an experiment. So even though we have the same machine in theory, some of us have different versions, but it's 40 watts. Each machine has different quirks. So what works for my machine and what works for your machine might be super, super similar, but depending on how clean your machine is, how clean my machine is, there's going to be variation. So even if somebody gives you settings, you want to test them before you use them. Again, it's an experiment. It's a test. Settings that I used when I first started were like tons of power, super fast, and then I spent a ton of time cleaning up char. I luckily had people tell me other settings. It was slower, but there was less charring, and it worked out better for me. And so be willing to update your settings. Be willing to try things out. It's an experiment. You're not looking for right answers. You're looking for what works best for you. So that's sort of my overarching philosophy. If you're not somebody who likes to dabble or experiment, you're probably going to get discouraged and frustrated. So just be aware, this isn't exact science. Experiment, even with good settings. And I got a material today that wasn't exactly what the last material I got was, and so I had to play around. I had a good starting point, but I had to play around to see if there was possibly a better setting. So any questions on philosophy? I'm having to jump through windows, so I don't see if machine isn't too loud. Volume's good. All right, so we're going to move on. So that's the philosophy. So now material profiles. Let me move up to where Sonic is. This is a great feature of our software. We do, to my knowledge, there's no limit to the number of profiles that you can have. It's something you're going to do every single time. It's something that you find saves you time, because when our machine opens and closes, it's a little annoying, and it resets settings. So I have tons of them. I have tons and tons and tons. You start with some when you begin, and then I've added a lot of new ones. You can even update the ones that the machine comes with. That's what this little pen is. So another thing is you can't reorder these, which is a little frustrating. So finding something, you've got to scroll carefully. You want the first 3 letters, if at all, 3 to 4 letters, if at all possible, to let you know what the material is, because this window is only so big. Things that you've just used tend to be in the top like 3 or 4 spots. They'll shift around, and then the other ones stay in order. So if I use the paper setting, it'll be up here for a little bit, and then it'll drop that down to where it originally was. So we'll walk through adding a new profile. Can you guys see that screen, the top monitor screen? Let me make sure that it is showing you all that screen. Okay. Excellent. I think there's even more of a delay. So feel free to write in the comments, but I'm going to keep plugging along and hoping that you can see Sonic at some point, because in the playback, I don't see myself. Excellent. All right. So adding a material profile. First off, you're going to name it. You don't need to write in the material thickness. So today I did another dry erase. It's from Lowe's. So where it's from, my dry erase board that I get from Home Depot, is completely different beast. Using the same settings would not be good. And then this is whiteboard. So WB, you could write whiteboard in there. And then this one is just whiteboard. So I'm just going to put, whiteboard, WB, and it's 3 millimeters. So cutting settings, I started with my previous settings, which was 80 power and 6 speed. I found that actually, since this doesn't have blackboard on the back, which is what the other one, it's whiteboard on one side and blackboard on the other side, I could actually get away with going faster. Vector engrave. Vector engrave is actually scoring. So whenever it says vector engrave, it's actually scoring. What scoring is using a cut line to do a score, which is also a non-deep cut. So it goes very quickly. You can use it to outline cutting boards. You can use it for different things. In this case, I was using it to score Sonic onto it. So I usually do between 20 and 30 power, depending on material. This is white dry erase board, so it does not take much to mark the surface. And then the speed, the max on the speed is 80, which is different from regular engraving, so don't get confused. And I find the sweet spot for me is 65. Part of what goes into this is 80 is too fast for most materials. I did, I think, 75 this afternoon when I was playing around with this, and it caused some of my scoring at quick junctions wasn't as deep, and so slowing it down to 65 helped. Number of passes is just the number of time the laser goes. Any of my 3 millimeter materials, I usually get away with 1 pass. Scoring, you would really never want to do more than 1 pass because you're not trying to cut through the material. And then for dry erase, which is what this is, or whiteboard, power and speed, I wouldn't engrave this material. So if you have that in there, and bitmap engraving is normal engraving. So it's filled in engraving, so to speak. Um, so I'll just rename this test whiteboard so I can delete it later because I have a bajillion and I don't want to get confused. So then you save it. It shows up here. And then you can see when you bring something in, so I'll just bring this in. It comes in. These are both these are both vector lines. And so the light blue shows it's selected. And then because I have this as my material, it's going to default to those cut settings. I'm going to get over the middle, and then I'm going to do engraving. And this, even though it says laser engraving, these are my vector settings, so my scoring settings. If I wanted to use the other settings for engraving, I need to go to the design tab, and then over here there's fills. It's really tiny, it's really hard to find, but when you click it, you can see that it fills in. So now, I don't remember, I didn't put any settings because I don't have it for this material, but if I had, it would have gone to the bitmap settings. So that would be what displays here. So again, vector is a cut line that's done fast, and it calls it in this material profile, it calls it vector engraving, and then when it's filled in, it's bitmap engraving or laser engraving. All right, so let's see if there are questions. Anybody have questions, please let me know. If not, I will start going on a tour of my material profiles. All right, everybody still there? We good? Let me just check in. All right. So now through my material profiles. So I will start at the bottom. So iPhone, this is the default one. I've never done iPhone. Paper, I have used this actually quite a bit. I've never engraved paper, but with Max is actually, this is the one time that I do use Max cutting. So paper, it's 0 millimeters, so it has no thickness. And this would be like copy paper. So that's paper. I have lots of settings for cardboard. The biggest thing I have with cardboard is depending on the weave of the cardboard, so the thickness and the density or the weave of the cardboard, your settings might change. So for a 3.5 millimeter cardboard, I believe this is like Amazon cardboard, my settings are 100 power, 22 speed. And let me see if I can get you all zoomed in on that. Give me 1 second. So hopefully you all can see this a bit better. All right, and then the number of passes are 1. Let me just make sure that it's catching up. Let me know. So software didn't install. Oh, your software didn't have any preset settings. Oh man, that stinks. The community document is helpful. Also, you can take notes or, you know, most of these are in the community document, but some might not be. Because I don't think I've entered like all of my cardboard settings in there because I don't think people cut cardboard as much as I do. All right, so hopefully this will be a better view for you all now. So cardboard, so cutting 100, 22 millimeters, 1 pass. Cardboard, I would say I cut a lot of, but it's also important to watch it more than almost any other material besides like paper. Yeah, you need to watch cardboard of any density. Um, so 2 millimeter cardboard, 90 power, 32 millimeters per second. Depending on if the cardboard's super bendy or not, you might tape it down. You don't want to tape over where you're cutting because that can mess up your settings. But you do want to tape things down that are wobbly. All right, so 90 power, 32, and again, there's an engraving setting in here. I don't tend to engrave things. Like I don't tend to engrave like paper products. So I don't engrave paper. I don't engrave cardboard. Things like dry erase board, engraving it would be a bit of a mess. All right, so there's my 2 millimeter cardboard. These are default. So I've never done willow. I leave mahogany in there. I think I've maybe tried mahogany once. Cherry. I think I have some xTool cherry. But they're harder to use, and ones that have veneer like that I would use mainly for building. So I wouldn't engrave. I did find engraving settings, but I would most often use those for building because once you get past the veneer, it just doesn't look very good anymore. So mahogany, cherry, pine. I've used xTool pine. It's a bit harder to cut, but 95% power, 10 millimeters per second, and one pass will get you through. Again, with pine, I didn't have the best experience with engraving. It turns smoky. All right, so black walnut I have never used. All right, so acrylic. I've never used 5 millimeter acrylic, but I do have 3 millimeter acrylic. I do a lot with acrylic. These are my cutting settings, so 100% power, 6 millimeters per second, one pass. If you do two passes, there's a much bigger kerf, and the kerf is basically what's taken out by the cutting process. If you're doing things like inlays, kerf matter a lot. By doing more passes, more of the material gets vaporized along the edges, and it's less predictable. So I like to do it in one pass. If you watch my inlay video, it'll tell you more about acrylic inlay. I use this settings a ton. Engraving. All right, let me fill this in because it's going to give you weird settings. All right, so engraving. This is my light engraving for acrylic. I don't have different profiles for acrylic engraving, but my light, so my non-deep engraving for acrylic is 50% 264. So that would be if you want it visible but not super deep. If you're doing something like filling with paint, you might bump this up to like 80% power. Again, you want to test it with a little swatch and a little engraving thing, but you might go up to 80 to get a deep engrave. Unless I'm doing something with like color block, which is like having multiple settings in the same job, I only do 1 degree of engraving, and I almost never do 2 passes. Again, unless I want something that's super, super deep. This material also creates a lot of dust, so just be aware that it will be dusty, and you'll need to clean up basically after every after every job. And also with acrylic, if you have a honeycomb, you want to clean your honeycomb out. It will create little vapor bubbles underneath when you're doing cutting, and they will make a popping noise. Nothing's wrong with your machine, nothing's blowing up. They're just little vaporized acrylic that's pooling underneath your material, and then when another cut line gets close by or it goes on, it's igniting and popping out. This also would be a good time to say that there's some materials that need to be vented. I have a super powerful 6-inch AC Infinity fan. It's most needed for things like acrylic, for rubber, also for dry erase board. It's super stinky, especially the one with the um, black, with the chalkboard backing. So this is acrylic. I use that setting quite a bit. All right, the other setting I use the most. Let's go back down. Don't want to skip. So 3mm acrylic. Okay, basswood. This is what I use for my xTool basswood. It's a very light board. Again, it's decided to do that funky thing. So 40% power, will make a mark on it. Again, if you want a deeper engrave, you might go deeper. All right, Baltic. Okay, acrylic, basswood, sandwood. All right. I would not recommend sandwood. That I got a sheet of sandwood. It was super cheap. A friend cut it up. It does not work well. It will flame up quickly. It will char quickly. It will not cut through very easily. I have settings in here, but I would avoid it at all costs. So it's there as a reminder to never do it again. All right, foam. There we go. Foam board. So not all foam board is laser bowl. Foam board from Dollar Tree is laser bowl. Anywhere else, I would not buy foam board. And this is actually so foam board is like poster board. It has one or two paper facings, and then there's foam between them. So these are my settings. You can do lots of super cool stuff. I did Valentine's last year, Valentine's kids kits with foam board. You can cut things to construct stuff that will be invisible. I did a star last year with foam board as the base and ducting tape, not duct tape, but ducting tape, metal tape. So foam board, you can also very cheaply prototype things. So if you want to try something, physically see if it works, you can start with foam board, and then you can move on to your next material. It's more consistent and more rigid than cardboard. You can also use cardboard for prototyping as well. All right, we're making our way through. I think we're almost to the top. Foam, stamp rubber. Okay, so this 2 passes. This is one of the ones with 2 passes. 100% power, 8mm per second. This is the stamp rubber. I've used the orange and the gray from you can find on Amazon. You want it to say that it's laserable stamp rubber. It's not the most. It's messy. It's not cheap, but making your own stamps or making custom stamps are amazing. So I highly recommend it. 2.5mm, 2 passes. It's awesome. All right, 6mm double cardboard. Okay, so again, this is another cardboard. This is the cardboard that's actually like 2 weaves, so it's super thick. And yeah, these are my settings. I do 2 passes because there are 2 layers to it. When you look at it in profile, you can see there's a weave, so there's paper, a weave, paper, and a weave. And so even at 100% power, you've got to do it twice. Again, with all cardboard, watch for flame, persistent flame. All right. So cotton fabric. Okay, so I have lasered fabrics. Um, I would not recommend lasering ones with high polyester content. Polyester is flammable. Um, but ones that have a minimum stretch, um, I would recommend laying it out on your bed and using magnets to make it taut. The other thing is if you're cutting a bunch of stuff out, once it's cut, it can get moved by the air assist, so you might need to pause your machine, take out the part that's cut, and um, and then resume your machine. But cotton fabric is awesome. Again, I would not engrave it. All right, so stainless. I don't know why that's yeah, I don't know why that's in there. Mylar. All right, so Mylar is awesome. It is also called stencil. It is one of the only laserable plastics that I know of. You can create stencils. You can create, um, you can create really neat stuff with it. I have settings for cutting, but your settings will vary greatly depending on the intricacy of what you're doing and how many passes are coming close together. So if you're doing a square, if you're doing a name tag, if you're doing a stencil that's a substantial size, then um, then this setting might work for you for Mylar. And then if you're doing something that's more intricate, you might need to bump down the power, but you want to keep the speed high. If you do slow speed, it will melt. Or if you get close to where you lasered before, it will melt. I see that you have some questions. I'll get to them once I get through. So this is the thin Mylar. This is 4 mil Mylar, not millimeter, but 4 mil Mylar. So there's 0.7 mil and MIL, and then there's 4 MIL. So this is my other Mylar setting. And both of these, I found the thinner one when I started. Both of them are good. I'd probably only get the thicker stuff now. All right, so this, so these are these are settings for Baltic birch, but doing a picture. So let me move that over. So again, so this, so doing a picture, Baltic birch engraving settings. All right. Did I skip over? Okay, 3 millimeter Baltic birch. This is what I use most often. Again, I started much higher, but I toned it down and slowed it down so it'd have less cleanup. So 50%, 6. Most of my engraving settings are the same, around 50 or 60 power, deep maybe 70, 80, and then 264. That's sort of the sweet spot I've gotten to with Baltic birch. And then I also have 6 millimeter Baltic birch, which is the other one that I use quite a bit. And it's 90% power, 8 millimeters per second, and then 2 passes. I've never gotten through in one pass and liked how it looked. So this is another one that 2 passes. You might have a little bit of charring, but it's better than charring the top surface to get through in one go. All right, let me see if I missed anything. Slate. There we go. Oh, slate, thin acrylic. Okay, I have missed a few. All right. Again, with the reordering. So I have a 5 millimeter cardboard. EVA foam. EVA foam is awesome. If you do cosplay, if you do anything, you could do it for prop making. EVA foam cuts really well. This thin EVA foam also, I'm blanking on the name of it. They sell it in packs. Um, so it's 1.5 millimeter. It's the thin stuff. It might say it's 2 millimeters on the package, but it's actually 1.5. Cuts really cuts really fast. I wouldn't engrave it. I also have, again, this says it's 10 millimeters on the packaging, but it's actually 9.5. Cuts best in 2 passes. This is one that's also really cool. I don't have engraving settings, I don't think. Let me check. No. I don't have engraving settings for this one because depending on the depth you want engraving to do, you can actually really go deep. So I made a pretend Wii, not Wii, sorry, other console, Nintendo. Yeah, so the handheld Nintendo. So I made pretend one of those, and I was actually able to find settings for engraving um, that would actually melt. So they would melt enough out so that I could do an inlay. So the back of it was good. I engraved out around 3 millimeters worth of space, and then I inset dry erase screen so they could draw. And then the other sides, I was able to find different settings, and then I was able to inset acrylic. So EVA foam is one of the few materials where you can actually use engraving to remove material so that you can inlay something without cutting all the way through. All right, we're on the home stretch. So EVA, two thicknesses, and then dry erase board. I have something I use for badges. I won't share that because it's a material you're probably not going to have. It's a super thin cardboard-ish material. Pencils. I have a profile for engraving on pencils. Slate. So you don't cut through slate. It's stone. Let me. I don't know what's doing that. Found another bug. So here's my slate settings. So slate coasters. These ones are from Michaels. I got them online. I had friends saying, "Hey, they have the sale again. You buy a bunch of them. They ship them to you." I'm still working through those. So 80% power, 330 millimeters per second, and slate is awesome. You need to get a little used to what it's gonna look like. It's gonna make a lot of dust, and it's gonna engrave. It's gonna engrave out. So you're gonna have a dark black, and then you're gonna have a whitish gray where it engraves away. But you can do some really really cool stuff with them. Make custom coasters, pretty fast, and I think a lot of people say they sell well. I haven't sold any of them. I've mostly been giving them away. But this would be a fast thing you can do. Hey, I need a gift this weekend. I think each of the coasters is maybe 4.5 by 4.5, somewhere around that, between 6 and 4 inches each direction, and you can do a coaster depending on the complexity in around 5 or 6 minutes. So it's super super duper helpful. All right, foam board. Let me just make sure. Okay, thin acrylic. So I get acrylic from CMS Acrylic, which is in Texas, and so I got some acrylic for Christmas ornaments. So it's super thin, 1.5 millimeters. I got some thin mirror. I got some thin like matte finish. So thin mirror, thin matte finish, frosted finish, and I got it thin so I could cut it fast and then layer it on top. So have like a mirror acrylic cut out from the thinner acrylic and then put them on top of one another. I love doing inlay I highly recommend playing around with inlay with acrylic or wooden acrylic. So that is almost the last one. All right, xTool, xTool wood tags. So I have a bunch of those because they came with other material boxes. My 6mm acrylic, 2 passes to get through that, and then it takes a little extra kerf off the top and polishes it so you can see the layers, but 100% power, 8mm, 2 passes. And I think that is that. Okay. So I'm going to check in, answer questions, and then we'll move on to testing and the community document. Nintendo Switch, thank you. Yep. All right, so let me check the questions. All right, kerf. Okay, so what kerf is so the term comes from like cutting with like a table saw. And so if you had exact measurements, so you measured this thing, you put a line in the middle, and then you cut it, you take out the material that's the thickness of your blade. If you're needing to put things incredibly close together, have them locking, have them, fit in specific ways, a lot of what you do, Jenny, with board game inserts, kerf is really important. So the normal kerf on our 40-watt lasers is 0.1 millimeters. So each time there's a pass, around 0.1 millimeters is taken out. Where that comes into play with fitting things together in slots, so say you're slotting in the edge of something, that thing itself, so we'll say it's a 5mm out finger. That out finger has been cut on one side and cut on the other side. So 2mm have come out of that. So then the slot is also going to get cut out. It's going to be cut out on all 4 sides. So if you make your hole the same size as your material thickness, you're going to have a bit of play in there because the material thickness doesn't change, but where it's taken off the top and the bottom of that finger for the slot, it's going to be slightly smaller. So people that don't want to use glue, people that care about exact fit, they're going to care about kerf. The other thing with kerf is 0.1 is for wood. It's for like 3mm wood. 6mm wood, my kerf is close to that. It's slightly larger. Again, I'm doing 2 passes. So 1 pass is taking off, amount, and the second pass, it's wider and going in deeper to get the bottom. So more on the second pass, wood is being vaporized again. Does it matter? Sometimes. Does it matter for most things that aren't locking in together? No. But that's basically how kerf works. My kerf is bigger on acrylic than it is on wood, so more of the acrylic is vaporized, and it's bigger with multiple passes. So there are some places where you can do kerf tests, like they have files for you to do. You can also just do the line and then use calipers. The other thing I would say with kerf, depending on your design software, it may see your stroke lines as a part of your size, but then when it cuts, it doesn't take into account your stroke lines. So I would take off your stroke lines when you're doing your measurements so that you just make sure that you're not thinking that it's a certain size and it's not. And that varies by design software. All right, let's see if there are other mirror acrylic. Okay. Leatherette that's safe. Okay, so 2 material questions. All right, so mirror acrylic. I will, let's see, I think I'll hold stuff up. So mirror acrylic, you want to cut and engrave it on the back. So this is super thin mirror acrylic. I was actually testing different depths of engraving. So this mirror acrylic, I cut and engraved from the back. So again, if you're doing anything, when you're doing mirror acrylic engraving, you want to mirror it, because what you see and what you read is going to be the reverse of what was engraved. Engraving away the backing allows you to paint it, so I just painted this black, but you could paint other colors. So here's engraving on a an opaque, so you can see how it's slightly white. And then here is my electric blue mirror acrylic, and then I engraved on the back of it. You can do ornaments, you can do boxes, you can do all sorts of stuff. You can have it as part of an inlay, doing, butterfly wings, and you want parts of it to be reflective. So mirror acrylic is awesome that way. All right, faux leather besides the leatherette. Okay, so veg tan leather, you can engrave and cut. It's super stinky. There are some leather settings in the community document. So there are some leather settings. A lot depends on how thick it is. So you're gonna want to use part of it to test that. But yeah, veggie tan leather is what you want. And if you're gonna be cutting, you probably don't want it to be terribly thick. So faux leatherette, things like that. But veggie tan leather, you don't want to do normal leather, because they're tanning agents that are bad. They'll mess up your machine. They'll mess up your lungs. All right, so those are material profiles. There's tons on the community document. I'm not going to go through all of those. If you have questions on some of those, and again, it's a community document, so it's possible the settings are on there, and I haven't tried them. I'm not rich. I can't afford all the cool, awesome things. All right, so we're going to go. Let me see. Are there any other questions before we move on to material testing? So sort of how do you test a new material? All right, not seeing any of the questions. I will check back after this section as well. All right, material testing. So let me pull up. All right, let me pull in my testing file, my cutting testing file. We'll start there. That's the simplest. All right. Okay, and let me fix this for you all. There we go. The beauties of live broadcast. All right, so this is my friend. It's called Swatch 2 Electric Boogaloo. It is a 24 millimeter square with rounded corners. So this, in a second I'll show you, if I figure out how, my physical material library. But the first thing I do with any material is to test to find out what works. So you can see up here, hopefully you can see. This, I started with what I already had. It was super charry. I did variations of it, changing, first changing the power, and then I got to a point where that didn't work. So in here, none of these cut all the way through, but I was trying to see if I could do something, you can see on the last one, with less charring. Because of the back of this material does not have blackboard, it tends to not have a clean cut on the back. So because it's MDF on one side, dry erase on the other, I always start with cutting. So it's important to have calipers, measure the thickness. Again, we're in scientist mode. We put on our experiment hat. We say, you know what? If I waste part of a sheet, normally towards the edge, you're not going to use anyway. So that's why I focus on the edge. If you waste however much of this is to get good settings, you're not going to waste sheets and sheets of material. So you put on your researcher hat, you take notes on each test. I have taken a phone picture of settings before and a phone picture of the results. Dry erase is a little challenging because it's hard to write on it. I could use a Sharpie, I guess, but each of these you would take notes on what it is. Even if it doesn't cut all the way through, you want to list power, speed, and then passes. So with this, what I did is I started with now everything's all out of order. I started with my old settings. So I don't even know if I can find it because this is all reordered. All right, lows, there we go. So I started with my lows, whiteboard, blackboard settings. So I started here with 80 power, 6 millimeters per second. So I ran that. It cut it fine, but there's a ton of charring. Wasn't terribly happy with that. So then I went through. Sorry, Windows wanted to shut down my computer for an update. All right, so then I went through. I cut it, slightly modified, try it again. Slightly modified, try it again. I modified even more. I'm like, if this doesn't have that blackboard backing, perhaps I can do it faster. So I went up to 10 millimeters per second instead of 6. Tried it with the same power, and then I did with 10 millimeters per second, and I started upping the power to see if I could get that speed. I kept doing variations of that. I slightly increased it, coming back down, and then I got back to a point where I could find something that charred less than my original settings, and was slightly faster because of that backing. And I think that was I want to say 80 power and then 7 millimeters per second, which doesn't seem like a big improvement, but for large projects, that 1 millimeter per second can add up, especially if you're doing the same thing over and over again. So once you get cutting settings, you can do the same thing. So I usually do a 6 millimeter instead of 24. I do 6 millimeter, and this is if I'm close. If I have no clue whatsoever, I'll do a grid. All right, So I'll do a grid of these if I have no idea. If I think I'm close, I'll do a super small 6 millimeter, and then I'll do engraving settings. I'll start with my standard or something that's close to that material, and then I'll go from there. So with this, I'm not going to engrave on this material. What I did next was I actually tested out scoring settings. So I tested out scoring settings. So my scoring settings, again, this is my old profile. This isn't the one I made today. My scoring settings for this, let me actually go in and edit. So my scoring settings for this that I found worked well was 30 power and then 65 millimeters per second. So that got me. So this was my old board with chalkboard on the back, which is great but super stinky. And then here's the board that I was playing around with today. It's got an MDF backing, and then I ended up with 30% power, 65 millimeters per second to get that scoring. And these are reusable coloring sheets for my daughter's class. So this is one of the projects that we're working on, is creating stations for her kindergarten. So yeah, so that's the philosophy. Start with what's close, or do some research online, use a community document, something that's similar density, and then if the first thing works and you're completely 100% happy with it, that's awesome. If the first setting works and it's got some charring, or like, play around with it. When you get a new material, you're now a material scientist. Play around with it, find the best setting for you, and doing a quarter of a sheet or doing around the edges, the edges you never use. At least I almost never use up to the edge, because it's something that it's hard to get the camera and all that. So if you use up material, build that into your cost, and you're getting your degree in material science. Engraving's the same way. Engrave, figure out your engraving settings. Once you understand a material, you'll be able to, on the fly, all right, I want it deeper, I'm gonna add 20 power. I want it, I want it lighter, I'm gonna do this or that. And yeah, you want that familiarity. All right, I'm gonna check on questions fast, and then I'll show my physical. Okay, nobody's got any questions. All right, we're entering the home stretch. Okay, here we go. All right, so I have this little box that has tons of materials in it. So so this is bass. This is, let me see if I can make this easier. There we go. All right, so this is xTool basswood. This is the default settings. So what came with the profile, I tried images as well. What level of detail of engraving can I get with those settings? And then I went through Pine. So here's xTool Pine. There we go. And then it's default, but with 2 passes. And then I have Cherry, which this is what the Cherry the default settings look like from xTool. And then a lot of other ones. Let me see if I have other ones that have writing on it. A lot of the other ones, like once I get a good setting, I still cut out a piece of it, but I do that so that I can bring this to a show. And so he's like, oh, well, I like this, but, I might like it, another way. And I have my palette of materials. So I can say, okay, well, that's great. I have this ivory, that might go well. So this can be something, it reminds you what you have without hauling everything out. But it also is a physical place, where you can write. I leave the backing on acrylic, and you can write down notes or settings. If you do something funky and you're like, oh, I want to remember this, you don't want to make an entire new profile, you can add it to your material library. So that is my material library. And there I have tons and tons and tons of materials in here, and bringing this to show. So like this is the one that I made this afternoon. So when I got to my best setting, I wrote down 80 power, 7 millimeters per second, and then 1 pass. So now I have that in there, and that will allow me to skip some steps when I come to use this material again. It's also a good backup, like the community document. If I ever, for some reason, they did a software update and it wiped, it wiped those, I have a physical backup as well. Okay, home stretch. So testing materials, unique materials. So there are some materials where you literally don't want to waste it testing. So um, things like glass. So if you have wine glasses, you might go to Dollar Tree and get some testing glasses. Dollar Tree glasses are great. They're thicker than champagne glasses, so they're more durable. You're less likely to break them. And so, yeah, you might find a similar substitute with Yetis or glass that you need to get it the first time. I recommend masking. So placement matters. You can have a masking tape setting, and you can carefully, set up a jig. So if you're using your rotary, set it up, tape it off so it's not going to move. Have the brim flush up, with your rotary so you can replace it exactly where it is. And then use this tape to mask off the area. Then you, just like you did with anything else, you develop a masking tape setting, and this masking tape, when you engrave on it, it turns white. So you can test your engraving and placement on your Yeti, and then very carefully, having marked off all those things, if the placement is good, you know where you started, you've marked that out, very carefully remove the masking and place it exactly in the same place, and then change your settings to your settings for Yetis. Anodized metal is one of those things where there's enough variation in manufacturing that you can't have an exact good settings, but enough people are doing it that if you say, hey, I got Dollar Tree, whatever, or hey, I have a Yeti, that this color, you can do a lot of good research to get good settings. When you're doing Yetis, cleanup matters too. So maybe, you used your settings, you did as good as you could, and you're like, it doesn't look sharp, like the metal looks faded or whatever. You can actually go in and clean until you get to a nice sharp result. So those kind of unique materials where you can't necessarily practice on a bunch of it, you can shrink down those cutting squares, or you can, use something else to get it set up and aligned correctly. All right, we are very close to time, so let me do one last call out for questions. Again, this is a crash course. This is a journey as you become comfortable with yourself, comfortable with your machine. You'll get an instinct, you'll get an inkling, you'll know, okay, I'm going to start with these engraving settings because it's a similar density wood, or I want a similar look to something that I already have a profile. So the more you learn, the better you'll get, the faster it is to get new settings. I could have stopped at probably the third square on my on my dry erase board, but because I'm going to be doing a few of these, I wanted to see if I could eke out just a little bit more productivity. All right, let me see if I have questions. All right. So, okay. So, Yeti is a brand of tumbler that's incredibly expensive. So, it's a drink container. It's usually stainless steel, and then there's an anodized paint coating. They're super expensive. So, like, people don't want to waste them at all. I mean, it's like a $45 cup. It's crazy. Um, so and then so when you engrave off that material, um, you might see that it doesn't completely remove the paint, or that it's not shiny. So the stainless steel isn't shining, and so you can take. I wish Camille was on here because she's done it more, and Ashley. But you can take like a diluted isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip, and you can get rid of some of that burn residue and make it shiny as the stainless steel is. Um, so then I'm not sure what clean. Yeah, so cleaning it to make the detail look sharper. All right. Any other questions? Okay. I will wait. I will wait a minute for you all to catch up. It looks like um, you guys are a ways behind. So when you get up to this point, let me know. I don't want to deprive you of a way to ask questions, and we will call it a wrap once you all have caught up. As always, thanks for joining me. Shar's Craft Lounge is a monthly live stream. Um, I have new links. I'm trying Amazon affiliate stuff. I have links to my fan. I have links to the um, cleaning stuff I use. LA's awesome, and feel free to use those if you're going to be buying xTool materials. If you're going to be buying Baltic Birch, there's links as well to those affiliates. If you want to buy a P2 or buy one of the new things coming out, it would be amazing if you used my affiliate link when and if that time comes. There's now a 40-watt diode out as well. So every bit of that goes towards me scraping out some more time to help you all the best way I can. So, as always, thanks for watching and have fun lasering.